In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am super excited to speak with today's guest. He is a 3-time Inc. 5000 founder with a track record of building and growing successful companies. Earlier in his career, he founded and led Relevance, a company that grew rapidly to become one of the fastest growing companies in the country, earning multiple Inc. 5000 rankings, including a top 100 placement. During that time, he led his team through sustained high-velocity growth. His leadership has also been recognized with numerous awards, including multiple Best Places to Work awards. In recent years, he's focused his current company at the intersection of leadership and performance, applying insights from neuroscience to help leaders operate more effectively under pressure. He is the CEO and co-founder of Dream Fuel. Kevin Bailey, welcome to the show.
It's wonderful to be here, Natalie. That was a great introduction.
Well, lots of great things to share.
Thank you.
Kevin, I start a lot of conversations with a transformation story. And for you, I'd really love to start with a moment from your journey that I think will anchor a lot of the topics I want to bring up with you today, because I know you had the experience of building and scaling a high growth company pretty early in your career, and that, that sometimes comes with a lot of success on paper, but also some real pressure behind the scenes. And so later in the conversation, I do want to get into how that shaped your thinking around mindset and leadership and all of that. But to start us off, can you take us back to that period and, walk us through what was happening as the company was scaling and what you were navigating personally as well?
Yeah. So back at my technically first startup, although I did dabble in other companies before, was founded with a couple of my good friends from high school, just recently graduated from college. And it ended up being a really high velocity company. It was the one that got to Inc. 58. And as we were scaling that, I'm just past about 100 employees, I had my first kid. And it was kind of, I was in my 20s, first kid, not realizing all the pressure that came along with building and growing a company. When you get lucky enough that you have product market fit and it starts growing, you got to change constantly as a leader. And I was CEO of the company, and I just started to really hit a rough spot. And my leadership was suffering because of it. And I remember I would just sit there and stare at my computer screen a lot, and be in kind of a freeze response. And I was very ineffective, I felt like. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And at that point, I started meditating, and I was lucky enough to meet a neuroscientist who worked with athletes, and she started to teach me some skills to help work on my mindset, help change, the way I showed up for my team. And it was kind of a combination of mindfulness, which gave me awareness, and then the neuroscience-based tools that sort of reprogram how I showed up, that made me go, wow, this is different than therapy. These tools are incredibly effective for my future and incredibly effective for leadership. And it was just, I never knew there was stuff like that existed. So I started to realize that there was an opportunity that I was very passionate about for helping not only my team, but leaders at other teams perform mentally at a better level. And that was kind of the seed of Dream Fuel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I want to talk more about Dream Fuel as we go through the conversation. I think hearing your story and kind of the, how you describe it with, you knew your leadership was suffering. What was the process to kind of get yourself out of that? You mentioned finding kind of meditation. Were you looking for something different? What was that process kind of coming out of that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's a while back. So like I said, I can remember a lot of staring at my computer screen, not being productive. I can remember a lot of physical symptoms related to stress. Like I had IBS at the time, and that was challenging. I can remember going home feeling like a zombie, like not being able to show up for my relationship effectively, not being able to communicate well. Like I was peaking at a level of stress that I think was just I was doing okay at work, but I think most everything else suffered. I lost a lot of friends. And I think the meditation thing was just a recommendation from my parents. And like it's kind of like, it's kind of weird, but maybe I'll give it a try. And I can remember the first deep meditation I had, I was like, whoa, I feel normal again. And then, like I said, I ran into the neuroscientist, and she was like, that's great, you're cultivating awareness, but let's see what we can do with this. Like your brain's like a computer. We can reprogram this. And I think that was kind of led me down the path. And then just little tools I started sharing with my team and saw a great effect, especially on the sales side. When we were like my sales team, it was like before even breath work was really in the zeitgeist, so to speak. And, we would do a little bit of breath work before our team meeting. And I was like, before and after is incredibly different. Like we're actually having a real conversation right now. We're solving real problems. People are opening up rather than just being, all tight and stuck and holding back. So I remember we solved a lot of problems in those first few meetings we had just doing breath work. And then I sort of, took it from there and, really changed I was both a leader and at one point I stepped away from the CEO role and I became an enterprise salesperson for the company. And I about doubled my close rate using some of these techniques. So again, stuff is, used with athletes for a reason, so you can show up consistently at your very best. And I was finding those tools were very effective at helping me be a better leader and a better salesperson.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, the reality is what can look very successful, like externally, can feel very different internally. For a founder, I know myself, like I'm in EO, Entrepreneurs Organization.
Yeah.
I've been in Vistage and WPO. And I think one of the things that I remember kind of early on in those days and being kind of in those peer groups was kind of everyone facing the same kinds of challenges. And whether it's imposter syndrome, kind of stress, a hard time with kind of the perfect balance, so to speak. And it's something that just doesn't get talked about enough, especially not in kind of open circles, but is so prevalent.
Yeah. It's all over the place. We did a study with the second company I worked with. It's called Powder Keg. It's a Midwest tech community, and did a big survey about not just the topic of mental health, but a lot of different areas. But it was amazing to see some several hundred tech founders, and the results came back, and it was almost disturbing. Just a lot of. It's kind of like not that all founders have like clinical mental health disorders. It's just that when you put yourself in really high pressure situations, you can sort of resemble those, generalized anxiety and stuff like that. But yeah, that was when I was like, whoa, this is a real problem. There's a lot of founders, a lot of entrepreneurs that are really suffering.
Yeah. I'm curious, as you kind of approached your next venture, once you'd kind of been enlightened, so to speak, were there things you approached differently in how you either kind of built the firm or kind of set up your role for success?
My first company was really high growth. My second company was a tech community. And then this company I have 4 kids, and this is my love. This is, one of my loves. This is something I'm really passionate about. My first company was not that passionate about the topic. And this is one that I want to, keep long term, meaning like, I don't see any reason to like grow and exit this company. Maybe, at some point down the road. Yeah. I'm not angling for an exit. So this is like, um, I'm here to stay. If an opportunity comes to sell it, it makes sense for the investors and everyone. I'm down, but I'm very mindfully building this company. So I try and lead this company with my intuition a lot more. I also try and align it with, in my case, being a Catholic. I try and allow, I guess, to not alienate anybody, the universe to have a hand in the construction of this more so than my ego. and that's been tricky, but very nice.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a guest I had on the podcast, Ricky's son, I don't know, probably 6 or 9 months ago now. But he was talking about kind of Eastern versus Western philosophies, and he was
Mhm.
raised with very much kind of an Eastern mindset, and just how that has shaped the way that he leads and the way that he leads his team, and really kind of thinking more and kind of taking that moment to kind of catch yourself before you act. And it was, really impressive to see kind of the impact that that had on himself and then on his team, and is now kind of a different culture than what you typically find in Silicon Valley, for sure.
Yeah, Eastern philosophies are amazing. I try and integrate as much as I can. I wasn't raised Christian, so I've spent as much time studying Buddhism and stuff as I have studying Christianity. But yeah, both have wonderful philosophies for, I think, helping businesses be more harmonious,
I'm
impactful.
curious how kind of this journey for you has shifted your leadership style. Like, how would you describe your leadership style, kind of currently, and kind of how has it evolved over
Yeah.
time?
Well, my first startup, sometimes they would, I say lovingly, call me Darth Vader. Um, so
Now I
I'm a
understand
tall,
why you laughed.
tall and loud, but also I was a bit of an ass. Um, I would say at this company, again, much more intuitively led, and I think I push up against my, well, I got to practice what I preach. I push up against a lot of the leadership compulsions I have that maybe aren't adaptive, and I work with them, and I try my best to not, again, do things unconsciously. So I think a leadership style is more open, more transparent, um, more understanding, more compassionate, but also maybe in some ways a little more straightforward. Like if changes need to be made, I make them. Sometimes they're really painful. I don't really delay things too much. Like before, like yeah, I was my ego was so pronounced in my first startup. It was all about how does it look, and this company is a little bit more like what actually works, what matters. Ego aside, what's the best move?
You mentioned, pushing against some leadership compulsions that are non-adaptive. Do you have any examples that come to mind? And then, like, specifically, how do you work with yourself to kind of push past them or fight against them or whatever the case might be?
Yeah, I mean, stuff comes up, a lot. At one point had a team member who was doing small behaviors that were eroding trust. I tried to address it. It was an effective team member, by the way. They were doing their job well. I tried to address the issue, didn't quite get sorted out, ended up parting ways with the team member relatively quickly. Um, this is something I barely would have noticed at my first startup, let alone taken action on. These were small things, but I was kind of like, well, okay, how am I going to trust this person with the big stuff if they're eroding my trust on the small stuff? So I took decisive action. It was painful, I think, for both parties. I still think the person's cool, great person. It was no, but it was like, yeah, I think in the past, like I said, I was barely aware to notice the trust was being eroded, and I wouldn't have taken action on small things. I wouldn't have the foresight to see how small things could turn into big things. It's like one example.
Yeah. Which I think, to your point of kind of intuition, I think one of the things I've learned a lot over the years is trusting my gut. And it's something that felt kind of too squishy maybe earlier in my career, but you learn to really listen to those kind of little voices in your head to speak about sanity, right? And
Yeah.
but usually there's something to them. And so taking the time to kind of pay attention to them, and then even if the decision is no action, you're at least kind of pausing, analyzing, and then deciding how to move forward rather than just pushing it aside and kind of moving on to the next task on the list.
Yeah. Intuition is very important and very hard to understand and tricky. It's like, yeah. How do you tell the difference between something that's an intuitive nudge versus your own fears? That's tricky.
Are there any like ways that you do that either for yourself or in kind of the work that your firm does that you guide people to kind of how to do that the right way, so to speak?
Yeah. A few things I guess we could talk about that might be helpful for people trying to understand the difference between their intuition and maybe their inner critic and different head voices that can be pronounced. First thing is to note that your ego inner critic, uh, let's see what network in the brain, fear-based networks in the brain, antisocial networks in the brain, the amygdala, is that those voices are really loud and pushy. So intuition is kind of like more like a whisper, typically. So if you have like something that's blaring in your head, like normally not your intuition, it's hard to recognize that because you think it's like, oh, this is the part of me that's like supposed to, help me get away from danger or something. No, the defensive networks in the brain get you away from danger. That's fine, but nuanced, intuitive, strategic decisions come from a much deeper place. So the first thing I think is to note that it's more like a whisper. Like I said, in most situations. Now, you can ramp up your intuition by controlling your physiology. So you take somatic breath work, which is something we do with executives on Thursdays at noon Eastern. We'll take like you've been on that. So breath work, if you do breath work, it's kind of like turning your intuition on. So then the inner critic gets quieter and the intuition turns up. So you can hear it a lot more. Another thing you can do to check your intuition is uh, really your intuition speaks through your body quite often. So when a decision makes you feel open and expansive and lighter, that's normally an intuitive yes. When a situation makes you feel closed off, shrunk, independent, disconnected, that's normally a no. So you can kind of look at how your body moves, like internally. Does it make you feel more open? Can I breathe? Or does it make me feel contracted and closed? But yeah, I think it's a lot about state management physiologically to tap more into your intuition. So if I'm ever in a like this is a tough situation, I don't know what decision to make. I might just do 5 minutes of breath work and then reflect on it. Like, okay, how do I feel in this state of consciousness to make sure I'm not just making a snap decision that's based on fear.
Yeah, which I know can feel like the hardest thing to do, right? When you've got a never-ending to-do list and lots of
Yeah,
critical
you're
decisions to
five
make. But
minutes. Don't God forbid, it's like I have 5 minutes to try and fix my state before I do something. Yeah, you're right. We always feel like we're under so much heat.
yeah, yeah. But I had a client a number of years ago say, kind of her mantra was "slow down to speed up," right? And so this feels like
Yeah,
a perfect example of that. Of you need to give yourself that time, and the more you feel you don't have it, is maybe when you need it the most. But I will give a quick plug for your CEO meditation breathwork sessions because I know that's how we came on each other's radar, and I'm always amazed by right. It's a 30-minute slot. I know you do it kind of free and open to the community, and just how different I feel before and after. And I'm certainly guilty of being one of those like I couldn't possibly carve out 30 minutes today. I've got so much on my calendar, but every time I do, I'm so thankful. And there is something nice about that kind of accountability of having that time on the calendar and having other people around. I know it's for me at least. It's harder when I have to hold myself to it kind of solo.
that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, it's breathworks are great. We're gonna start putting those on YouTube soon, so I'm really excited to see them make even more impact. But yeah, the little community we've got of people doing breathwork together, founders, CEOs, sales leaders, and stuff. It's called like they have a minimum viable MVP, minimum viable product for like just maintaining your mental health as a founder is just like one breathwork session once a week if you're going to do something. Like I think that's just a great way to just dump, empty out the nervous system, recenter yourself. Yeah, I'm glad you enjoy it.
Yeah, I also, as the marketer and kind of networker, and me also just loves the genuine community building that you have in that. Right, it does feel very genuine. Kind of nothing remotely salesy about it, but adjacent and relevant to to your business. So I'm curious how that came about as just a concept of how to kind of build relationships within your ecosystem.
Yeah, it was one of our coaches actually. We do this basically. The initial session we normally do with a client is a breathwork and visualization session about their goals. And over time, we started building more generic ones that weren't about people's goals or were about like climbing a mountain or like symbolically they represented something that, helped a founder maybe feel tangentially related to something maybe more strenuous they were dealing with. Like there's some things we do that do feel like climbing a mountain or running a marathon in a desert, etc. So we started doing those, and I was like, oh, these are cool. And then the coach was like, can we just do these for people? I think we should do more of these for people, and it'll grow and people will come, and want to work with us more. And like he was just kind of like, let's just do it. So all right. So I just emailed our newsletter and just said, hey, we're gonna do this session. If anybody wants to show, and people showed and they came back and just became kind of a staple.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. Hey, this is Natalie, your Shift and Thrive host. After chatting with lots of CEOs, one thing is crystal clear. Leveling up your company means having a killer go-to-market strategy. That's what my crew at Magnitude Consulting does every day. If you're trying to step up your marketing game, whether it's strategizing, accelerating your pipeline, expanding into new markets, or getting into AI and automation, let's talk. No pitch, no pressure, just good conversation. Visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com/Natalie to schedule a time. Can't wait to connect. I want to talk a bit more about kind of the macro environment that we're all operating in, because when I think of kind of the pace of change from, AI, competitive landscape, just the general kind of noise and pressure in the world we're facing, there's a lot of demands on any leader. And so I'm curious, how are you seeing this showing up in your the types of leaders that you work with? And I want to get into kind of what are some of the things people can be paying attention to, but curious just kind of what are you seeing now and how is that taking form?
It's a good question. We work with a lot of software leaders. A lot of them have AI products. Some of them some really successful AI products, and AI does make more work for us. So you can do more. So you do more, and you get more work on your plate. Ultimately, you're just moving really fast. So I kind of think about it like a race car, like an F1 car or something. And it's like, okay, an F1 car's got to be really fast. It also has to be super stable. So, you put wings on it, you create downforce, you put great suspension on it, really sticky wheels so you can take turns at high speed. And I think it's a great analogy for tech leaders in AI right now. It's like you're going super fast, but it's real easy to be unstable and hit a wall. You just go way down the wrong direction. So I think teaching leaders how to slow down, how to become more mindful, how to be more decisive in their decisions and actions, how to trust their intuition a little bit more at speed. Um, it's like I think that the next decade is going to reward leaders who are more psychologically stable because there's just more opportunity for growth, more opportunity for problems.
Yeah, I'm curious, what are the kind of tools in the arsenal, so to speak, to help someone who kind of needs to kind of rebalance, like reset, that is kind of that race car that's maybe becoming more unstable. I know you talked a bit about that earlier, but is there kind of a set of types of things or techniques to be looking at?
I think the big one is the basics. It's generic and cliche, but I think getting a strong meditation practice in place is about the best thing you can do to stabilize your mindset. And from there, with that awareness, then you can do all the other tools and techniques that really help you reprogram. But yeah, I would say if you don't have a meditate, if you're feeling unstable, and you don't have a meditation practice, the best thing to do is to start one. There are plenty of apps. the way that I went about it was through transcendental meditation. I think transcendental meditation is fantastic, great program. You get a coach, a teacher. So I would say that's probably my number one suggestion for somebody feeling unstable at high speed is same with me. It's like I felt unstable at high speed. Meditation practice really helped with that. So I'd say that's step one. Um, Obviously, you can come to the breathwork sessions. It's a form of meditation. That's guaranteed to work. Breathwork pretty much works for most everyone. Meditation can be a little more tricky and challenging. It takes time, a lot of time. But I'd say, yeah, meditation. And yeah, if you are an AI leader moving at high speed, I think this is tough to say, and I think it's just a little tricky. But if you let your mental health get way out of whack and you're trying to lead a team and trying to build a product, your mental health issues get reflected by your team and the product. And I think, it's kind of on us to keep that in mind as we build these companies. If you're the leader, you're hierarchically, the energy flows down from you. Obviously, it flows up from your team as well, but if you're getting unstable, it's going to manifest throughout your team and ultimately in your product. And that's not something anyone wants, is to let their issues and traumas and challenges get reflected on the marketplace.
Yeah. It's you're making me think of a quote. We used to have this up in our old office. The speed of the leader is the speed of the gang. And
Mhm.
it was a quote that I was always drawn to, and it always to me and earlier in my career meant kind of faster, right? Like if I'm slow, then everyone's going to be slow. And it took me time to realize that it goes in the opposite direction, right? If I'm rushing around and always busy and all of that, that's felt by everybody, and that's not necessarily a positive. So I think it's hard to
Yeah.
find kind of that sweet spot.
Yeah. Truth.
Another topic I know we chatted about when we spoke previously, and this is near and dear to me, is kind of the difference when a CEO or founder feels friction between what's good for them personally and kind of what's good for the business or what the business needs of them when those two things are at odds. And I'm wondering if that's something that comes up with the type of clients you work with, and if there's any kind of techniques or ways of thinking about working through that.
But yeah, I mean, you talk a little about sacrifice. What sacrifices are you willing to make for your company? What sacrifice is the right level of sacrifice to make for your company when something doesn't align with you at a core level, um, or requires you to do something maybe that you're not comfortable with doing? It's different for everyone. And depending on your life, the way your life is structured, whether you're single, have kids, that kind of stuff, is important to consider as well. Like your company's making you travel all the time, but it's like, it's impacting your family negatively. I kind of, as I was alluding to before, I think that your company is a reflection of your state. So if you're going to make a decision that's going to trash your state and you don't have the tools to hold stable in whatever you're contemplating doing, I'd say don't do it. You may be able to do it, but if it hurts your state, I think it's ultimately going to create negative consequences down the road. I'm not a huge fan of just relentless grinding unless you have all the tools in place. There are people who are meant to grind and meant to just like gut it out, and their life is structured that way, and they know every tool. They're fantastic at recovery. Take a professional athlete, yes, like, or a special forces soldier or something. Like their job is to like gut it out, and that's cool. And there's a lot of salespeople that do that, but doing that without the tools to regulate your nervous system and recover effectively, you're headed straight for burnout. And again, as the leader, if you burn out, it's tough to keep the company going and strong.
Yeah, sounds reminds me of like the air mask analogy, right? That's cliche, but you can only take care of yourself. You can't take care of others until you take care of yourself. And I've heard that for parenting. It seems very similar for the business, as well as thinking of like the athlete example? Are you kind of gearing up for a big moment, a big game, or is this kind of your new normal, and so you can't just continue to kind of hustle your way through it? You need to find a new way of working.
Exactly.
I'm curious if you have any views on the role of AI use, like personal AI use in for a leader, kind of good or bad.
It's a big topic for neuroscience right now. I think it's obviously a powerful tool. A lot of technology involves trade-offs. So if you think about Google, well, it started to depreciate the value of knowing knowledge off the top of your head. So people maybe became a little bit less, the optimized brain started allocating a little less resources to knowing facts. You take something more basic, calculator obviously diminished people's ability to do arithmetic in their head. AI right now is offering opportunity for us to diminish some of our capabilities around writing and some of our capabilities around logical thinking and hand that off to something else. And the brain will always optimize around that, if it can. So this is one where, maybe not knowing facts is not that important. Maybe not knowing how to do arithmetic in your head is that important. Being able to think logically and write is pretty fundamental. So I just think it should be used with moderation as a personal assistant, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always think about like if the world just unplugged all of a sudden, right? Think about what you'd have left and making sure that you feel comfortable with the skills that you have.
Yeah, I mean, if you lose your ability to think rationally and make decisions effectively, that's not good for a leader.
Right, right. So I know, Kevin, we've talked about a lot of areas kind of related to your business, but I'd like to, hear a little bit more explicitly about kind of the company itself. And so, like, when founders or leadership teams come to you, like, what are the things they're typically struggling with, and talk a little bit about the actual kind of the ways that your team works with them.
Yeah. So again, high growth companies typically, we've worked with hundreds of high growth startups at this point, typically after a Series A ish, We've taken a lot of those companies, not a lot, but we've taken a number of those companies through IPO. And when there's a ton of pressure on a team to perform, they got a board that's really intense. They got, giant sales goals to hit. You start to look at yourself and your team as a corporate athlete. And if somebody wants to show up consistently as their very best self day in and day out, to be brilliant every day, regardless of what, the environment is giving them, that's something that is required of professional athletes. They can't be up and down. That's an elite performer. So when teams need to be elite performers, that's when they come to us, and VCs and private equities send teams to us. It's like, okay, we don't want this to be a gamble. We want this to, we're shoring up every aspect. So let's shore up the team's mindset. So that's typically when companies come to us and teams come to us. They want to build an elite mindset. They want to make sure that they don't self-sabotage, stuff you talked about, imposter syndrome, et cetera. This is stuff where, it's important enough to bring in somebody with a background in performance psychology or neuroscience to help. There are executive coaches out there that dabble in this stuff, but this is like all we do. Um, so yeah, we're specialists in that, and it's yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's like we can help people be in a really intense situation and enjoy it a lot more because they don't feel so vulnerable to the environment.
Right, right. I love that. And I'm curious of, when you recommend this specifically for the leader versus for a team, or is that kind of purely up to the client?
I always recommend the leader needs to do this. So either doing it with their team or independently and then bringing it to their team. sometimes we get leaders who come in, they're like, hey, help my team with their mindset, but I'm not going to do this. Again, I get energy coming down hierarchically from the leader. It doesn't work. So, yeah, it's either start with the leader or start with the leader and the team. But yeah, it's not one of those things where like, hey, we're going to bring in a sales coach to work with my AEs on some, sales angle. This is like leader has to be involved for it to really resonate.
Yeah. I could see it being a very kind of impactful beyond kind of the outcome of the work itself, but like good kind of bonding, team building for the team to
Yeah.
go through that with the leader, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it when done well, like it impacts everyone's lives. Their mental performance coaching their kid before a big game. It helps them manage their dynamics of their relationship better. It's just the tools are effective at much more than just work.
Do you have an example, like a before and after of either kind of a leader or kind of a whole team, obviously without naming any names, but a story that stands out for you of the impact?
Yeah, this is kind of public, so I can probably mention the leaders in the company. So there's a company, Greenlight Guru. It was one of our early clients, and we started working with them like right at the beginning. So they were operating out of like a warehouse. And the two co-founders, David and John, both brilliant in their own regard. David, CEO, John, basically the original founder, the idea person, an engineer. And they, weren't very exposed to this stuff, and they were just kind of, running the business the way they knew how. David was very experienced in like seventh business or something. And I knew David and he kind of brought us in to work with the sales team, but I noticed there was like some dysfunction at the executive level. And I was like, hey, I think I should work with you and John. I think I can help you guys. And as I was noticing that, it was like their partnership was starting to really get strained, kind of why I suggested it. So I was like, all right. So David's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And I started to work with John and David, and the tools that I was teaching them started to help them show up differently for each other and eventually healed the business partnership because they were about to split and it probably would have broke the company. So when they got a nice 9-figure exit, and when they did, John told me, he's like, hey, really grateful that you did this work with us because I don't think we'd be here without this work. I don't think I think the company would have dissolved. That's what he told me. So cool. Yeah.
Well, that's a pretty big impact.
Yeah.
Um, I'm curious, how these kinds of concepts show up for you in parenting, because you mentioned having 4 kids that have kind of grown up in with you, kind of running and starting businesses. Um, and just any advice for other parents out there?
I don't think I'm like a natural parent. I think I'm learning to be a better parent. I've learned to be a better parent. I think I'm, much more natural at business. I have a wonderful wife who's really helped me through some of this stuff. But I mean, patience and being mindful with your children work is not the proving ground. It is, you know, being in the insanity on a weekend with 4 kids, like each with their own egos and desires and, little stuff that drives them crazy, wanting your attention in various ways. That's where the real metal, that's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So I think most importantly, the ability to be settled in a chaotic environment, that's been super helpful. I think before, when I had my first kid, I was really stressed. Like I said, I felt like a zombie and I could barely pay attention. But I feel like I'm equanimity, which is the ability to be totally centered. Like I'm very centered and stable in my family, and I think that it's very helpful for just the chaos that presents with that many children. And I don't
Yeah,
have, 4 is a lot, but I know people have like 9 or
I've got my hands full with 2, so I feel you.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like a mini venture, right? When you can't hire or fire anyone,
No,
yeah,
you're
you
stuck.
got yeah, yeah. Um, Kevin, I want to take us on a little bit of a sidestep because I know you had mentioned previously that you're doing research in applied neuroscience and non-duality. And I think depending on, how people hear it, it can sound, a bit abstract or philosophical. But I think it ties to some of the things you were talking about earlier around awareness. So I wanted to see if you could share a bit more about, what you're doing here and kind of what excites you about it.
Yeah, I'd love to share about that. I think so. I've been meditating for maybe 20 years. About I had heard of the concept a while back. When I first meditation teacher in transcendental meditation, they didn't call it that though. The TM language is like the cosmic consciousness and universal consciousness and God consciousness. They use those words for it. Everybody's got different words for this, and non-duality is just the academic word for basically enlightenment, which is a super loaded word, but it can be explained. And non-duality is somebody who has cultivated a lived experience day to day where there's not a giant distinction between their external environment and themselves, meaning if I'm the subject and everything else is the object, looking at it, sensing it, feeling it, the the distinction between subject and object starts to dissolve. Therefore, these people feel immersed in their environment, high flow. And everyday people experience non-duality during periods of like intense physical activity. So like an athlete might feel it being in the zone, a surgeon might feel it doing surgery. People can feel it doing psychedelics. So there's psychedelics that induce non-duality. But somebody who lives in non-duality, that feeling you get as an athlete in an intense situation or as a surgeon doing their craft at the highest level is always there. And that's persistent non-dual awareness, which is a continuum. It starts at like a kind of a temporary bouncing back and forth type of situation to more joy, more bliss, less sense of an independent self, all the way to the end of the spectrum, which is where they actually lose their sense of self and they have no distinction between themselves and their environment. So subject and object merge entirely. That's pure non-duality, highest on the continuum. Um, that's a that's a deep, deep experience. But yeah, I mean, I'm on the early stage of the continuum, um, and it's incredible and it's wonderful. It has challenges over time when you meditate. The default mode network of the brain, which is the part that's responsible for reflexive awareness, meaning like reflexive thinking about yourself, starts to dampen. The default mode network is what's on, really flips on when you rest. So when you rest, the default mode network turns on. This is why you start asking yourself all these questions. What did you wrong today? All this mental head trash is coming at you from your default mode network. And again, meditation just dampens that down. So if you meditate for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 10,000 hours plus, on brain scans, you're seeing a lot less activity in that network at rest. And that's one of the things that allows people to start to slip into this non-dual awareness. The most important thing to understand about all of it is everyone has this. It's just kind of remembering it because we're born into non-dual consciousness. So like a baby has it. They're not all in their head. They're kind of like observing things. So open monitoring meditation is what cultivates non-dual awareness. So as a baby, is just kind of looking around. You feel a baby, hold a baby. They're like, this beautiful energy because they're basically enlightened. They're just observing things. And somebody who's enlightened or in non-dual awareness is sitting back in their most primitive form of consciousness called pure awareness. They're just observing what's around them. They're not lost in the mind. So they learn to differentiate between mental activity and observing that mental activity. Most humans are lost in mental activity. Somebody in non-duality steps back from that into that baby awareness or baby mind, observes their mental activity, And it's very blissful, lots of serotonin, because the mind is dualistic. Dualistic is everything gets compared. The mind can't be non-dual. It's 100% dualistic. It compares, creates preferences, and then creates conflicts to get those preferences. That's like all the mind does. So somebody in non-dual reality steps back and observes that functioning and sort of starts to like be a little skeptical of their brain, more or less.
That's so fascinating. I can definitely see the benefit as you're talking about it. Knowing my own brain, I think it will be hard to attain. But I guess if myself or someone else wants to learn more, what do you recommend? Like what, like non-duality for beginners, something to read, something to grasp the concepts or try it out.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing was do a little exercise with you, and then I can tell them resources. But all right, you down for that?
Sure, sure. I'll
So
be
we'll
the
just do
guinea
this
pig.
with you and do it with anyone else that's listening. Okay, so if you just sit here and you kind of just get relaxed, all right. Describe something either in your internal environment or external environment that's arising right now in your field of consciousness.
Can I see or something mentally?
Could be anything. Either.
Well, I'm looking out the window and thinking about I'm enjoying the fact that the weather's warming up here in Boston. I was doing that to try to relax for this exercise, and at the same time thinking about, yes, I can sit back and relax, but also very aware that I am hosting a podcast and still want a smile on my face, and so all those thoughts all at once.
Great awareness. Do those thoughts just arise, or are you trying to think?
It just arose.
Okay. So, was there any? Did you have to put any effort into those thoughts arising, and they just kind of happened?
And it just happened.
Okay. And seeing out the window, did it take any effort?
No?
Okay. Step back into like your as primitive again as you can. Like describe what you're seeing in front of you as primitively as you can.
I see a screen. I see my notes. I see your face and mine on the screen.
Okay. If you see a screen, what shape is it?
Rectangular
You see a rectangle.
with lots of tabs open on my browser.
So as you describe something more primitively, it's even less effortful, right?
Correct.
So if I look in front of myself and I just see colors, that's really primitive, right? It takes no effort. All right, describe what you see in front of you in as much detail as possible.
I see a window. I see some artwork on the wall behind me. I do see the screen, the rectangular screen. I see my notepad in front of me with my multicolored pens for highlighting what needs to get done immediately versus later. I see the blinking cursor. Actually, lots of stuff around me because I have a very full desk.
Perfect. Um, did that take effort?
Uh, Not effort, but it did take some scanning.
Took a little effort, right?
Yeah,
Less or more effort than saying you just see a rectangle in front of you, right?
correct. Well, and there's no end to how much I could have described. So, right, more effort, the more detail I go into and picking out different components.
Yeah, you could have got real detailed, right? You could have got super focused. You
Oh,
could have
yeah, we could have
described
been
like,
on this podcast for another hour just talking about what I
yeah,
see around
could have
me.
went into the science of how light works or whatever, right? Um, so the reason I did that is to help you understand that different levels of thinking require different levels of effort, right? And as executives, we burn a ton of energy thinking, and we spend a lot of effort thinking, a lot of times about ourselves and how situations impact ourselves personally. The reason I did that exercise as well is I want you to understand that there is a level of awareness that is completely childlike, innocent, and requires no effort at all. which is seeing colors and shapes in front of you that you're not labeling. And if you can understand that, then you can start to understand that your brain is a tool and you can shift it into gear like you shift a car into gear, and you can flip it into neutral at will. And somebody who is in non-dual awareness sees shapes and colors and movement most of the time. They choose to use their brain when they want. And they have plenty of mental faculties, like Michael Singer, who wrote Surrender Experiment, which is a really popular book in the spiritual space. He built a unicorn. He did it in non-dual consciousness. So it doesn't make you any less effective not using your brain all the time. But what people in that state do is they shift themselves into seeing colors and shapes and movement again. Like they're just not thinking very often. And then when something happens, they use their brain. And in fact, their brain's more powerful because it's not thinking about themselves as much, and it's not used so much. So it's like it's ready to go. It's fully recovered. So that little exercise, obviously somebody can do on their own, but it's starting to realize you don't have to live in your mental faculties. You can live in that pure awareness that just notices things arising effortlessly and doesn't think about them very much.
Huh, I love that. Well, thank you for taking me through it. I think of kind of peeling back an onion, and right, the more you learn, the more there is to learn. But I think many of us have heard like we are not our thoughts, but
Mm-hmm.
that can be a hard thing to actually experience versus kind of to have a thought and then kind of move it aside rather than
Yeah,
have it
you did a
control
great.
or dominate, right, the situation.
You did a great job noticing your thoughts, and obviously, you notice your emotions. You start to notice all these things because you're the awareness noticing it. You're not like the thought. So it's like you start to notice, oh, these emotions, these thoughts, this environment around me. A good book to read that I recommend. It's funny because it was written by the same author who wrote The Secret, which is like a popular book on law of attraction, which has fans and critics. But she went on a journey for like 20 years after that, then wrote the book The Greatest Secret, which is about awareness and about non-dual. And I think she quotes a lot of experts in the field. It's a really good book for a layperson wanting to like wrap their head around the topic. And then there's a gentleman, David Bingham, who's the person who kind of helped her get her head around it. He runs a community. This a little British dude who takes care of his mom with Alzheimer's, but I would say he's very far down the continuum. He's a wonderful human. He's got YouTube stuff. Actually, you'd see him kind of like take people through exercises to get them to like call it self-realization, but to start to move into the continuum. They're just like conversations on YouTube. Pretty fascinating. Those are two resources if you're curious about it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, I will check that out. We'll put some links in the show notes for others who are interested as well. But I find it fascinating and so much more to learn.
Yeah, it
I
is
know we only
fascinating.
have a few minutes left, but would love to close by asking you maybe something a bit more introspective. Is what would you say is the best piece of advice you've been given, or the one that's stuck with you the most?
That changes over time. I'd say most recently, the best advice is given to us, gentleman. He's my executive coach. He's Bob Gleason. He's had like 5 exits and an IPO. Super smart business person. And he's like, just very much like Kevin. You got to take business day to day. Like stuff changes all the time. It's like just day to day. Simple. Don't get too far out in the future. Definitely don't get too attached to the past. Take it day to day. Be in the moment. What's happening in your business today. Make the best decisions you can today, and forget about it. It's kind of like my best business advice I've had recently, last few years.
Yeah, well, thank you. I love that. And as we wrap up today's conversation, if listeners want to get in touch, what's the best way to reach you?
Dreamfuel.com or Kevin at dreamfuel.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Kevin. I love this conversation and enjoyed so much of what you shared. But from hearing about your journey, some of the kind of advice and perspectives on mental performance, the non-duality exercise, which I have some homework to dive into. So thank you so much for everything you shared.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you. You as well. And thank you to everybody who's listening. If today's conversation sparked something new for you, and I'm pretty sure that it did, please pass this along to another leader. We know that insights like this fuel fresh thinking and help all of us drive real transformation in our companies and in ourselves. So thank you again, Kevin. And this has been another amazing conversation on Shift and Thrive. I'll see you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.